Women are so incredibly strong. Like, I just cannot get over how strong we are. And we don't give ourselves credit for everything we do and everything we have made it through.
Welcome to Women Winning Divorce, the podcast helping successful women navigate divorce with dignity so you can protect yourself, your children, and your assets. I'm Heather Quick, founding attorney at Florida Women's Law Group, where women win at life. This week, we had Jessica Frew on the show, and we had a great conversation about making better decisions, trusting your intuition, and making the decision to divorce. I hope this episode is valuable to anyone who might be listening. Stay tuned for the full episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, Jessica Frew is joining us, and Jessica is the host of Your Next Best Decision podcast and teaches women how to make decisions confidently. Today, Jessica and I will be discussing how to fix your broken decision maker, confidence in decision making, and her own rather unique divorce journey. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, Jessica, for our listeners, would you share a little about your background and story?
Yes. So when people ask this, I'm always like, all right, this usually starts when I met my ex-husband. We were in college and we met at a choir concert one night randomly. I was getting up to leave. I was like, I don't want to be here, but it was like part of my major. So I felt like I had to. I was like, I'm out though. Like, tonight's not the night. And as I'm sitting there and about to leave, this group of women walk in, they start filing down the aisle and they all start sitting in front of me. And they take up this whole aisle, and they had one guy with them at the very end, and there was no room for him. So he ended up sitting next to me, and the rest was history. We went out on a date the next day, and we're together every day after that. And it was kind of just like this easy flow into our lives. And we met in February. We were married in December, so it was pretty quick. And then about 6 months into our marriage, I one day was sitting at home and I found all of this gay porn popping up on my computer, like all this pornography. And while I knew he looked at porn, I had no idea it was just all men. And this was back in the day when like pop-ups would pop up on your computer, literally, of things you'd been looking at. And so I had just sat down to the computer and all these things came up. I was like, okay, this is something different to navigate. And Steve and I, my ex and I, had both been raised in a very conservative Christian religion. And so for him, being gay just like wasn't an option. It wasn't in his mind. He like didn't even let himself think about that. And he had, that night when he came home, I asked him if he was gay, and he had convinced himself that that it was just better to only look at men so he wasn't disrespecting women. And he had this whole story of denial that he had put himself into, of denying the fact he was actually gay. And so he still at this point couldn't tell me he was gay. And he told me later on, he's like, that was the first time I even let myself think the words, I'm gay, is when you asked me that. And we continued forward because we were like really happy in our marriage. All of the things were lined up and we're working, and we were like, okay, well, we continue forward. And a couple of years later, he was in counseling, and the counselor was like, okay, these things you're dealing with are an issue, but the real issue is you are gay. Until you love and accept yourself for that, you're going to continue to have all of these other issues. So at that point, he officially came out to me, and we had this conversation. What does this look like? Do we continue forward? And again, we were like, yeah, we want to continue forward. We were actively trying to have a kid at that point, and it just felt right for us. And I know that sounds absolutely nuts. My husband's always like, and why didn't you leave at that point? Like my new husband, like, why didn't you leave? I'm like, hey, we can go both ways on your ex. And we continued forward, and we ended up having a little girl 5 years into our marriage. And then 2 years after that, Steve had an affair with a man. And we, again, still were like, we can figure this out. But at that point, Steve was no longer attracted to me. And he was like, I can't keep doing this to you. And I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. And so we decided to get divorced. But in that process of getting divorced, we took some time that I think is kind of unique. well, I've found to be unique when I'm working with women going through divorce, and really sat down and decided what we wanted our divorce to look like. And we did this outside of like high emotion moments. Like there were obviously times that we were pissed and angry and feeling all of the things. But when we could talk, we were like, listen, let's have a good conversation about this. And really planned out what we want divorce to look like, because we plan kind of what we want our marriage to look like and how we hope our life looks like, but there's no plan for when it doesn't go as planned. And our main concern, like what we wanted and had in this vision of what we wanted our divorce to look like, was we never wanted our daughter to have a big event or something she wanted both of her parents at that she had to worry about inviting both of us into the room. I didn't want her to be worried at, I don't know, whatever her life looks like. I used to say like her marriage and graduation, and now I'm like, I don't know what she wants for her life. But those things that she wants her parents at, I wanted her to have us both there without reservation of what that was going to look like and have to worry about that. And so Steve and I kind of made this intention and goal to be able to show up that way. And for us, that kind of boiled down to us hopefully staying friends, being able to support each other and working through that. We are now 12 years post-divorce. I have been remarried for 11 years. So I did get married again pretty quickly. I know what I want. And so we are still really good friends to the extent that we do holidays together when that works. We, like Steve just celebrated his birthday at my house with my family and my parents. My current husband is supportive of Steve. And if you ask him, he's like, Steve is part of our family and we love him and we support him. Steve has a current partner that he's been with for about 3 years who is also a part of our family now. And it's been about like trusting what works for us and doing kind of those things that work for us when other people are like, what are you doing? This is nuts. We're like, we know, but this feels right. And we're going to act on it and pivot and shift as we need to. But that's kind of like my broad stroke story of what's brought me here today, really, how I've gotten to this point.
So is your daughter about 14, 15 now?
She is 14. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, because that is a unique story, and I applaud you both for being able to do that, right? And how is her relationship with you and with her dad?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is like, I always hesitate to say this because I'm like, we're in the thick of teenage years, you know, and who knows on the other side of that, I mean, everybody comes out from their childhood years being like, oh, my parents really screwed this up. And so I know there are things that we're messing up. And also, I know that I have a 14-year-old daughter who tells me everything and who feels comfortable vocalizing, like, hey, I don't want to go to dad's tonight because of this and that. And I don't want to be at your house right now because of this and that. And so she feels safe in vocalizing what she wants and needs. And for me, that is like the ultimate thing I could hope for my daughter, is that she has the confidence to understand she gets to speak up for what she wants and trust what feels right for her in her gut and her intuition, and that she has parents who aren't going to make it about us. Yes, there are moments we have to check ourselves in that and be like, okay, I need to release whatever it is I'm feeling to show up for her. But she seems to be thriving and doing well, and that we just keep cheering her on in that.
That's awesome. So now professionally, you help women make decisions. And I'd love if you could share a little bit about the journey to getting to there, and your focus on helping women make decisions.
Yes. When Steve and I were in the thick of our marriage and divorce, I joined support groups. I was like, I need some sort of support here. And initially, I joined support groups for like friends and families of pornography addicts, because that's kind of how Steve described himself at that time, was a pornography addict. And honestly, I think support groups of any kind are amazing when you find the right ones.
Right.
But as I started into these support groups, I realized I was more of the leader in these support groups and providing hope and space for these women to own their stories and to recognize that they had the power to shift things in their life. they weren't there to change the other person. I think often we go to a support group or we go into divorce or even marriage counseling or whatever, relationship counseling, and we think that we're there to change the other person. We really think, okay, I just need the other person to do this, that, and the other, and then it'll be fine. In that we give away our power. And so in these support groups, I was realizing, okay, I have something here that I can offer to people. And so after I was divorced, after I worked through the craziness of remarriage, which is a whole nother thing to go through, I
Right.
was like, all right, this is my time to take our story and share it to other people so they feel less alone, and to help women feel empowered in using their voice. Like, we have lost our voice in so many things along the way. And so that was kind of how I ended up there. And initially it started out, I said, hey, Steve, my ex-husband, and I reached out to him. I'm like, I'm going to start a podcast sharing our whole story, and I'm going to do it whether you're on board or not, like whether, but I'm wondering if you want to share it with me. Like, do you want to come share your side of things? And he's like, let me think about this for a minute. And he came back and he's like, yes, I want to. He's like, I was at the lowest of lows when you and I got divorced. And if I can share some hope for people going through something similar or even not similar, but just needing hope of some sort, he's like, I would be remiss not to do that. He's like, this is free to me, basically. I want to share this story. And then my husband was like, can I be on this too, and like be the facilitator? And I'm like, yes. So the three of us sat down and started hosting a podcast together. And as we did that, became aware of like how I can share and help support women, like the different venues there, and avenues of being able to do that. So it's just kind of grown from there.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, that in and of itself is a wonderful thing, because not all new blended families can interact, you know, positively or in a, in a good way with the exes. So that's just
Yeah.
great that you guys were able to do that. But then now you have a new podcast, right? Are you still
Mm-hmm.
doing the original one, or you've kind of moved through that story and now
Yeah.
your new one is your next best decision?
Yes. So we have ended that one. We ended it in April. It was called Husband-in-Law. All of the content is there, still there under my new podcast name. So I've just rebranded that. But yeah, now it is Your Next Best Decision with Jessica Frew. And it is taking this information and knowledge and helping women feel empowered in that decision-making process.
And so let's talk about when a lot of women, come to you, and you've shared a lot about they have what you would call a broken decider. So what
Mhm.
is that?
Yeah. As we have grown up, we have been taught the first person we are taught not to trust is ourselves. We are taught at a young age that it's like, oh, you're too emotional, or oh, it doesn't hurt that bad. It's not that bad, or it's not that big of a deal, or you can't wear that, and your hair shouldn't be that way, and you shouldn't dress this way. And it's really all these shoulds that other people have put on us. And it's done out of like good intentions. Our parents, our teachers, whoever is trying to help us and support us in what they believe is the best way to move forward. And so at a young age, we are taught to shut down our own intuition and to not listen to it. And then that continues to grow as we hit teenage years, and we have this desire to fit in and to do the same things as everybody else and to look the same and all these things. And so again, we shut down our own intuition because we think, well, in order to be cool or in order to be liked, I need to do this and that and the other. And then we hit adulthood. And I always say, then we hit like that Pinterest mom phase, or I have to do this to be a successful employee or to be a successful entrepreneur, or whatever it is. We have these ideas of what it has to look like, and we shut down what it is we want and need. And in that process, we are breaking our deciders. We are showing them that, you don't know what is right. Somebody else knows what is right for you. And so we don't lean into that, and we shut off what it is we want and need and feel. And therefore, our deciders, they aren't actually broken. they just aren't heard. We just haven't
Mhm.
given them space to have a voice in our lives. And so we then have to repair that and regain that muscle of being able to make decisions that are in alignment for us.
Now, how, that's great and makes so much sense, right? When you walk through that. But I agree. I think too often in women in particular, don't trust their intuition to be too polite, to do things, that you
Yes.
should do rather than go with your intuition. So, how do you teach women to make better or maybe more frequent choices?
Yeah. So the first step of this process I always take people through is really getting in touch with your decider on like a very basic level. And it sounds basic and it's really hard for us to do. So things like I challenge them, I put them into a challenge process where each day you are going to take action on one thing that you want, that you feel in your body is right for you. This can be like, what clothes do I want to put on my body today? What actually feels good? What is going to make me happy? What do I feel like I look good in? Not what I've been told I should wear. What food do I want to eat? And this can be hard if you are like, first of all, been in like diet culture at all, or if you have other people in your life that are influencing those food decisions. I encourage women though, like, what is it you actually want to eat outside of all of those outside influences? And we start flexing this muscle on those small day-to-day things of being able to listen to what it is we actually want and need. What type of workout do I actually want to do today? What will actually feel good for my body? Not just what's on the schedule or what I have been told I should do, but what would feel good to me. And we start doing these things and flexing that muscle, and then it grows and it develops into these bigger things of like, when we have those, we're like, okay, there's this bigger thing at hand here. How do I get in tune with what it is I want and need? What am I feeling in this moment? And how do I act on that?
And that's what you describe as like the decision lab method, right? Building that muscle on
Mm-hmm.
decisions based on your intuition. I'm just
Yeah.
putting all these words out there, but is that
Yeah.
pretty much what that
Yeah.
is?
What we do is we go through, so in the decision lab specifically, I have a 6 week lab that we go through, and it's the beginning steps of this. It's like a rough and tough, like, let's introduce you to this concept. And the first 2 weeks we focus on unshooting our lives and hearing our intuition. So we release the judgment. I call this the be gentle phase, where we are learning to be gentle with ourselves and not judging ourselves. So we let go of this judgment of what I should be doing and why I should be doing it, and putting all of this guilt and shame on our actions and what it is we want. And then the next 2 weeks of that are the be humble. It's the be humble phase, which is where we release our ego, because it does come down to that as well, of like, well, this is what I should do. And this is what this means about me if I don't do it, and all of these things. We release that and we get in tune with, we get curious about why it is we actually want these things, what it is we actually value, and how the things we want are actually in alignment with this. They are leading us towards these things, not driving us away from what we really want. And so we take that time to kind of, I call it almost like a research phase of getting to know ourselves, but also understanding next steps for this decision that has been on our hearts that we've probably been ignoring for a while. And then we have be bold, which is the action phase of, we actually need to take action. We have to take a step forward. We can understand the decision, which many of us stay in that spot where we're like, okay, I kind of know what I need to do, but I'm not acting on it. And you're held accountable for that. And then we celebrate, and we also understand what is right now, because it's in the action that we gain the clarity, that we get the most clarity. So I take this little step forward. We're not changing our whole lives in 6 weeks. We're taking little steps forward, and then we look at them, we're like, okay, what did this actually feel right? Or is it just information of, no, this is so wrong, I'm going to pivot over to this other thing, I need to shift to the other thing. So that's part of what I teach too, is we make decisions and we understand that no matter what the outcome on the other side, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it goes exactly like we had planned. It doesn't matter if it's the complete opposite. It gives us the information we need to be able to take the next step forward. So sometimes we just need to clearly see that this is not the right direction for me, so that I can shift and act and take action confidently in the other direction. So that's kind of what my process is, I call it the triple B decision-making process of be gentle, be humble, be bold to take these steps forward.
And where do you find that most women get stuck in decision making?
Step one, it's in that in that placing judgment on what it is we want and need. And so the judgment is what keeps us from taking the action. And it's whether it's, perceived judgment from other people. Well, what are people going to say if I do my hair the way I want to do it? If I wear the clothes I want to wear? If I take my steps forward with this divorce? What are other people going to say and think of me? And what does that mean about me as a person? It means I've failed. Like, we have all of these things that
Right.
we internalize and believe. And so that, like, keeping all of that, I call it the should, like a pile of should. We get ourselves stuck in this pile of should, and it keeps us from taking action because we're afraid of what that means about us.
Mhm.
When we can get into that next step, we create that understanding of why we want that and why it's important to us and why it feels right. That then empowers us to actually take action and make the decision.
And, when you're working with women, like, and they're having a hard time, trusting their gut because they're worried about the judgment or so many other things. But do you find, especially with all the women that you've worked with, women have good intuition and just don't act on it?
Oh my gosh, yes. Our intuition is the most amazing asset we have in our lives. Like, it is spot on, I would say 98% of the time. But what isn't spot on is when we let everything else into our lives to kind of mess with that intuition. It's when we take in other people's opinions. It's when we allow other people to like create judgment on what it is we want. That is when it creates, like, sends it off kilter, and we're like, well, I did the thing I thought that I knew was right. And I'm like, but did you? Did you actually enter your marriage or whatever knowing it was right for you? And also, you can enter a marriage knowing it's right for you and it end in divorce. Like, I
Right.
firmly believe Steve and I were meant to be together, even though it ended in divorce. Like, and that helps me in that divorce process of recognizing we were meant to be together for a reason, and I can embrace that reason and love that, and then also move forward with this new part of my life. So I firmly believe that our tuition is right almost all the time. And when it's off, it's not that far off. It's usually just
Right.
getting us information. And it can send us down a path that maybe, like, we're like, well, that wasn't right. But no, now you have, again, that clarity of knowing that isn't right for you so that you can really embrace what is right for you.
And how do you help women learn to trust themselves and to trust that intuition?
Again, it is like that really basic, going back to the basics of leaning into what it is you want and need on a very small level. Like, we are going to trust this on a small level and really fine tune this process of hearing what it is we want, and also understanding it can take time to take action. It doesn't have to be immediate. It can, like, everybody's different in this process. And so understanding what it is you want and need. We really, really dive in and focus when I work with women on that first part, that shoulding part of, like, where am I shutting on myself? Where am I placing judgment on the things that I need to do? Where am I placing judgment on the life that I want? And how do I release that? So we do a lot of work in that point so that your intuition speaks up clearly. Because think about it like anything else in your life. If somebody is giving you advice and it's advice you don't want to hear and you don't act on, which is totally fine and good, that person's not going to, after a while, they're not going to keep speaking up and giving you advice. The same thing happens with your intuition, except that's the advice you actually want. That's the voice you actually want to listen to. And so
Right.
it takes time to rebuild that trust in yourself of, oh, it is okay to lean into this. Nothing horrible
Mhm.
is going to happen to me. In fact, it's going to get me where I want to be faster than if I just sit in this other place of judgment and self-deprecation and being like putting shame and piling all these things onto myself instead of taking action.
Now, you also teach a lot about self betrayal. And for our
Mm.
listeners, what is self betrayal?
Yeah, it's exactly what we've been talking about. It is that lack of not listening to what it is we want and need. It's dressing the way somebody else has told us we should dress. It is showing up for people the way they want us to show up instead of how we actually want to show up. It is those moments of when we say yes, when we know we really want to say no to whatever
Mhm.
it is. Those little moments are self-betrayal. It is denying who we are and what it is we want and what it is we feel, and all those things. It's denying also like of feeling our emotions and embracing those. When we deny what it is we're feeling because we're trying to keep the peace, or it's just easier this way, or whatever, we've been told we're too emotional, so we suppress. All of those things are forms of self-denial or self-betrayal.
And so, okay, I'm going to ask you this because I want, I would imagine, you've dealt with this because like there's just a lot of stuff we have to do that maybe we
Mhm.
don't want to do, right? And it's to achieve the end result maybe which we do, and that could be in terms of things with our children, our husband, our work, our, a lot of places, right? You do have to dress a certain way, you
Yep.
have to act a certain way, and with your kids, like sometimes you just got to do stuff. So how do you help you know help, I guess, women, discern and kind of move through that in a way that these are things, but you kind of signed up to do them, or maybe not, right?
Yeah. I think there's a fine line of understanding what things you actually have to do
Okay.
and what things feel right for you. So we talk about like when we're in the thick of divorce and all of those things, betrayal, going through those, like we are emotionally run down. And I encourage women to simplify. And so one of the things I'm always like, listen, simplify what you are eating. We are like, okay, I have to make dinner, like I need to feed my kids, that type of thing, but you can simplify that. What are ways that you can take the less decisions in that process that you can make it as easy as possible for you? Because ultimately, it is something you want to do because you want to show up for your kids. Like this feeds into a desire of something you are wanting to accomplish. But I think that we also need to evaluate on a regular basis, is this really something I want in my life? Like, yes, laundry, I want to do it because I want to be a hygienic, clean person. I don't want to stink. Like those types of things, like they feed into what things we actually want and need. Ways to simplify them though. Like I always encourage that. Figure out a system that's easier. Give more responsibility to your kids and those things that you can, especially when things are emotionally heavy, of being like, hey, I need extra support. But I think that there's this, we have to remind ourselves on some level there are things I want to do that I don't like, that have things attached to them that I don't want to do. So
Mhm.
this leads to an ultimate goal, so ultimately is something I want to do, but in that moment of like, no, I have to do this right now, I should do this today, I should do this in this moment, we can think, okay, there's like a simple shift in words here of I could do this. I could do this right now. And even that opens us up to having a choice. Okay, I could do this right now. Do I want to? Do I have to? Do I need to? Instead of just like I should, where that places that shame and judgment on it. So, okay, I need to do the laundry. Okay, do I actually have to do it right now? Could I do it tomorrow when maybe I feel a little bit better? And today I just need a nap and like a break, because it's true, sometimes we just need that
Right.
rest, and then we can show up better and get more done instead of sitting in this like, no, I have to do it right now, and trying to pump ourselves up. The other thing that I really encourage people to do when we are like, there are things I want to do that are getting me towards the ultimate goal and I'm lacking the motivation, inspiration to do them, because I get there a lot where I'm like, okay, this is just, I don't want to do any of these things. So I always encourage people to pick one thing that feels doable. Doesn't have to be the most important thing, doesn't have to
Mhm.
be whatever. It's just something that you can actually do. So sometimes that's like, I'm going to walk across the room and pick up that thing that's needed to be put away for a week, and I'm just going to go put it away. And then I'm going to look around and figure out the next thing. And as we do that, it creates this momentum of like, okay, I can get things done. I have the power to do something, and it creates this little bit of motivation or momentum that we need to start taking action and moving forward. I think we get stuck in this like all or nothing mentality where I have to do everything at once or I have to do it perfectly. And that keeps us from taking action, even on the small things of like, I just need to do the laundry. I don't have to do it all. I could do this
Mhm.
one load, or I could just fold this part of it and put it away. And usually once we start, it's like, okay, now I have the ability to keep going. I can keep that momentum. And at least I got one thing done, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because, just in life and in dealing with our clients and even with, children, anybody, it's when the decision seems so monumental
Mhm.
and just overwhelming, but it's as you break it down, right? Like maybe I'm just going to sort the laundry because this is a good
Yeah.
example, right? I'm not going to do the 5 foot mound, that is built up because I don't want to do it, but
Yeah.
I'm going to sort it. And then,
Hmm.
well, maybe I'll just throw in one load and it'll be smaller. And, I think your brain can then now take this a little bit easier into small pieces. Um, and accomplish it. And I think that that is very helpful because, and again, remembering that ultimately we do want clothes to wear. So, and we
Yeah.
don't want them to be dirty for ourselves or our children. It's just in the moment. I think you got to pivot and either break it down, take a break, and really figure out when does this have to be done
Yeah.
to achieve the overall. Now, okay, I have to ask you this too, because I think this is important for everybody and our listeners. Why is it important to keep promises you made, to other people as well as yourself?
Okay. So I'm like really torn on this.
Okay.
Yes, there are promises that we want to keep that are important. Like we have obviously if you've brought children into the world, like you have made a commitment to those kids to feed and clothe them, meet their basic needs. Outside of that, I am very much of the mindset that if it no longer feels in alignment for you, if you have committed to something that you're like, I can't show up in this way, then you are doing nobody a just like you aren't serving anybody if you're just pushing through in that thing and continue forward. Now, yes, there are things that you are going to push through on. Yes, there are things that is like, I need to do this or whatever. But I think more often than not, there's a way out. There's a way to say, like, listen, I committed to this and it felt right in the moment, and I am in no place to actually do this. Like, this is, I'm going to do it not to my full capabilities. And there is somebody out there right now who can and who wants to. And so releasing that and then taking that note of, you know what, I committed to this, it didn't feel right. And now next time I'm not going to do it. Like I'm not going to commit to this thing because I know it's not right for me. I'm not giving to my fullest in this moment. Now, you do want to create that proof that you can follow through and that you do follow through because there are things we are passionate about that we follow through. So I'm going to use the example of my daughter. My ex-husband has a really hard time feeling like my daughter follows through. She takes a lot of mental health days from school. Because it's just like she's at my house most of the time during the school week. And so I'm the one dealing with that. And she's got a little bit of anxiety going on. She's got some different things. She's in junior high. She hates it. And like, I'm not sending my daughter to school when she is in tears, bawling in my car on the way to school. I let her stay home. Now, what I do not do is go in and follow up with all of her teachers. Like that is on her. It is her commitment. So she is making a choice. She knows to have this mental health day, and then also knows that on the other end of that, she is going to follow up with all of her teachers, get her homework done. She has straight A's. And that's part of the reason that, I'm like, okay, you're obviously still getting things done. I have never talked to one of her teachers or interacted with them, but she knows the responsibility on the other end of that. So is she going to school every single day and all that? No. But is she getting the things done that are important to her? That, I mean, she's the one that wants the straight A's. And I'm like, go get it if that's what you want. And she's the one that shows up for herself. So we can create this proof in different ways. Am I showing up for myself because I'm doing every single thing that I committed to and I'm burning myself out? Or am I showing up for myself in the ways that I knew this was too much? And so I said, listen, I can't do this. I need to remove myself, and showing up for yourself that way. So I think this comes back to how we envision ourselves showing up for ourselves. Is it more important that we push through and look like we're accomplishing everything and doing all the things? Or is it just important that we are saying, I don't have the emotional or mental capacity to do this, and showing up for ourselves that way, of honoring those needs? So we have to create that proof in whatever feels right for us. It could be right either way. For some people, it's right in different ways, but you have to decide what that looks like for you and create that proof within yourself of acknowledging and that I do follow through, that I do show up for the things that are important to me.
And I think that's, important. Like, right. Like, how did I show up? And I thought it was important for me. Maybe it's changed, or maybe it still is. And I just have to shift in how I'm
Yeah.
accomplishing that. Now, so let's talk about making the decision to get a divorce, because that's a big one.
It
And so
is a
how
big
would,
one.
and I mean, you've been through that. And I know it, it wasn't something you just, did overnight, right? Like, you guys, you got to that point, obviously, but how do you help women with that? Because that's just a big one to
Yeah.
break down.
Yeah. Um, I've helped a lot of women walk through this decision of whether it's right for them. And I've had more women who have gotten divorced than who have stayed, but it's some start into the process and they're like, I'm staying. This isn't what's
Mm.
actually right for me. And this is what I encourage them. Like, listen, just because you are feeling into getting a divorce, like what that process is and how that feels for you, doesn't mean you have to get a divorce. But it is going to give you clarity, and it's going to make this thing that's looming over you and feels so big and overwhelming, it's going to break it down so that you can feel like, oh my gosh, I will be okay on the other side of this. Because often these women have been told, you are nothing without me, you can't survive without me, whether that's been directly told to them or not. Financially, you can't survive without me. We have all of these things going through our heads that keep us from taking this action that we know we need to take. So
Mhm.
I really encourage them to break it down. Like, what is one thing you could do today? This week, could you reach out to 3 attorneys or 3 mediators to kind of feel out what that even looks like? How much is it? What does it look like to work with them? What are the next steps? Could you talk to a divorce, like somebody who helps you with your finances during divorce? You can get on a free call with a lot of people to feel out these initial steps and see what feels right. Do you actually have what you need? Do you have the information you need financially to be able to get a divorce? What things can you start putting together now so that you feel empowered in that process? Now, we also go down to, like, when a partner says, well, I've changed, I'm doing better, I whatever, and you're feeling like, okay, I want to trust them, I want to believe them, and all these things, but it's not clicking. Like, it's not feeling intuitively like, but I actually don't want to stay. Like, that's what we're really feeling deep down, is like, but I really don't want to stay, even if you have changed, even if you are everything I hoped you were. I still, it's going to take, I don't want to rebuild that trust. Like, it doesn't feel like a safe place. Um, what are your values there, of like why that's important to you? Why is this next step important to you? What, like, getting gentle with ourselves, and then also taking that step of knowledge. Okay, so first of all, how do I release the shame around this? What are my beliefs around divorce? What is actually keeping me from taking this next step? What's the story I'm telling myself? Again, finances or fear or shame or whatever. And then how can I kind of tackle that in that next step of getting to know myself, and also doing legit research of feeling out this divorce process. So I
Mhm.
think that you have to fill that out. And there's a different timeline for everybody in getting
Right.
divorced. I mean, for
True.
me, I could have left at that 6 months mark when I first found that pornography, and I didn't, because it wasn't right for me to leave then. Um, and also, we don't want to sit in something and throw our lives into something that we know is wrong, that we have already know in our gut, like, I need to leave, I'm ready to leave. But we just keep, like, putting it off. So again, it's like that's, I call it smallerizing, like we were saying, breaking down the process, just
Right.
sorting the laundry. We're just going to sort the laundry. We're just going to find one
Mhm.
doable step this week and understand why we want to take this action. What is it about us so that we can take it confidently, knowing, okay, this is why, and remind ourselves of why in those really hard moments. And this is how it's going to be supportive to myself. This is how it's going to be supportive to my kids. This is like creating that proof of understanding again. Like we do a lot of creating proof in our lives of why it's okay and why it's actually a beautiful step forward and a gift to not only ourselves, but also to our partner.
Right. And that is true because it's usually not working for both sides. And
No,
and
yeah,
sometimes, we think it's all about us. It's like, well, it's really not when it's two people.
no.
But now you've talked about perfect partner syndrome before
Mm,
on other
yes.
podcasts. So I'd really like to hear a little bit about that too.
Oh man. So perfect partner syndrome comes down to us living into this idea that we are showing up perfectly for our partner. And this comes out again because we're like, oh, this is how I have to be. We have this idea in our heads of how we have to be a perfect partner. And I honestly didn't experience this as much in my first marriage as I did my second marriage. So when I dove into my second marriage, I was like trying to show up in all the ways. I needed to prove I was worth having around and keeping in my second marriage. I realized that that was part of what I was doing. And so I was trying to show up in every way possible for my husband's kids. I have two stepkids, and I was like, okay, I got to do all the things. I got to show him that I can manage the house and that I can take this weight off of him with picking up and dropping off of kids so that he can work and focus there and like all these things. I need to prove to his ex-wife that I am worth keeping around and that I can be a positive source in her kids' lives. And he really pushed me away at the beginning because of his own trauma that he thought he had dealt with and then like came out as soon as we got married. And so I'm feeling this push and I'm like, no, I gotta chase him. I gotta prove something here. And that's what we do is we get stuck in this cycle of like, oh, if I do this and I show up this way, if I do all of the things in the bedroom, if I cook all of the meals, if I look perfect all the time, if I whatever, and we get in our heads, whatever that looks like for us, because we each have a different vision of what being a perfect partner looks like.
Right.
And ultimately, we're so disconnected from ourselves that we are then disconnected from everybody else in our lives. You can't be connected to your partner or to your kids or to anybody if you are so caught up in trying or so disconnected from you and caught up in
Mhm.
trying to show up for everybody else. And so, like in my case, I actually left a year into our marriage. I was like, I'm out. This isn't working. I've been so afraid of losing you that I've completely lost myself. And that
Mhm.
is not me. Like, I am not one that loses myself. And I was like, I can't do this. And I came back just a couple days later. It wasn't very long, but with the intention that I am going to show up for myself first and do what feels right for me and start putting the healthy boundaries in place and all of these things so that I can be true to who I am. And some of those included like, I am no longer communicating with your ex-wife because it only creates issues. She then goes to you and badmouths me to you and badmouths me to your kids. And so it's just creating more tension
Mhm.
instead of helping everybody. It's creating more tension. So you have to be in charge of that. And there were certain things like that that felt not right of
Mhm.
like, this feels so backwards to me, but also I know it's right. And also for a hot minute, I think my husband was like, you're just like giving up on this. I'm like, no, just trust me. And so as he saw that, he was like, okay, this is creating less conflict for everybody in having this be able to play out. And so then I would implement something else. It was baby steps. Again, it was one little step at a time. It's really important for me that I have this other side hobby or that I'm able to pick up and drop off my own daughter first and not ask my parents to do that, but I get to be present with her in those moments before I'm present with your kids. And again, that moms get crap for that, but we also get crap for showing up for the kids.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. You're going to get crap either way. So doing it in the way that works for you. And that's really what I came back to do. And I was like, I knew my husband and I were really good for each other. I'm like, I am going to leave perfect partner syndrome behind. I am
Mhm.
going to show up in the ways that I need to first. And it healed my marriage. it created space for us to be able to be open and honest with each other and not just putting on this facade of where I can do everything and I'm going to do it right. And that's how we heal relationships if they're able to be healed. And sometimes in that process, you realize, oh no, I can't be true to myself and still stay in this relationship. And that's a signal that I need to leave. And other times it will heal that relationship. So perfect partner syndrome is when we find ourselves in, like, again, especially if you've been through betrayal because you're like grasping to keep this person, or if you feel them pulling away for some reason, you're like, oh, I'm going to do all the things, I'm going to prove my worth, but you are denying your own worth to yourself, and it just crushes you.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that can happen, that happens so to so many women and very easily. And it's also, I think I've found that sometimes we have this false sense of that we have control over all these things, right?
Oh my
And that we
gosh.
have complete control over our partner and all this, because if we check all the boxes and do this stuff, even though it's exhausted us, kind of starting to make us resentful when it doesn't work out, like all
Yes.
these things. And yet at the end of the day, you have no control over your spouse. And so it's an exhausting
Yep.
thing to try to do, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
And I bet you hear that from a lot of women when they're like, "Oh my gosh, can I really stop doing all of that?" Um,
Yes. Well, and speaking to that exhaustion just for a second, is we come out of like divorce or relationships on the other side and we are exhausted, and we think that it's mostly from the divorce, and it is. Like,
mhm,
going through a divorce, ending a relationship is an emotionally exhausting experience. And also there were years and years of us knowing we needed to make this decision or showing up as a perfect partner that we are exhausted from as well. And so I
yeah.
work with women to like, let's take a break. Like, you have to give your body a physical, you have like break, an emotional break, like all of the things. The mental load needs to be lightened because we have lived so long in this extreme exhaustion of trying to show up for somebody else. And then we go through a
Mhm.
divorce and there's another exhaustion, and it's just a lot.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's such a good point. Now, what would you say to a woman who feels stuck in a marriage that, she doesn't think that no longer serves her? How
Yeah.
could you help her like begin to move forward or make some decisions?
I think that there is this rebuilding of our self-worth in that process. Like, that is one of the most like beginning stages of coming out of this and being able to have the courage to leave or to take
Mhm.
action and demand more in the marriage. And it's not even usually that you're demanding more of somebody else. It's usually that you're demanding more of yourself, of just showing up for yourself, of actually saying no and all of those things. But I think that we have to build up that proof of worth for ourselves, not for anybody else in our lives. But I am worthy of having happiness. I am worthy of feeling contentment and peace in my life. And I think for so long we've been told that we live for somebody else, that we forget that we deserve those things too. And so if we've sat in it for a long time and we're like, well, I shouldn't leave. I shouldn't want to leave. It's not that bad. That's what so many of us say. It's not that bad. He's really great at these things, whatever, but I'm miserable. You get to be happy. And there are
Mhm.
ways to have that. There are so many avenues, and it could look so many different ways. And you aren't letting anybody down except yourself by staying. And
Mhm.
like, so the longer you stay, the more you're letting yourself down. And also, you are kind of letting other people down because we feel like we're showing up for them. But no, like you brought up the point of, if you're unfulfilled in the marriage, then your partner's usually unfulfilled as well. It's going to happen. Like, it's just the reality of the situation. And so you're actually giving everybody a gift in this moment of self-love by
Yeah.
allowing space for everybody to welcome in a new dynamic. You guys might
Mhm.
be able to co-parent beautifully, but you couldn't in your marriage. Like you're actually better
Right.
parents outside of that. And so I think rebuilding that work is where you have to start, and understanding the stories that you're telling yourself of why you have to stay
Mhm.
is powerful work to do when you're just at that point of, do I stay? Do I go? How do I know when to leave? How do I know what's right? And again, building that muscle of belief that it's okay to be true to
Mhm.
you.
Right, trusting your gut, which we
Mhm.
talked about
Yes.
at the beginning. Well, I can't believe our show has gone so fast. This has been a great conversation, Jessica. You're amazing and fascinating. I love all your experiences. But before we go, I'd love if you can impart on our listeners what you've learned about women and their resilience throughout your career and experience.
Women are so incredibly strong. Like, I just cannot get over how strong we are. And we don't give ourselves credit for everything we do and everything we have made it through. And so I just want you, like the listeners, to just identify everything you've done. Like, sit down and literally write down a list of things you did today, things you did in the last week, big moments in your life, and give yourself some recognition for that and some grace of like, okay, I need a break. Like, because I think we just power through and we're like, well, that's the strength, is powering through. And I call bull crap on that. Like, yes, there are moments of power through, and we do that, and we are amazing at that. And also, we get to take a break and be gentle with ourselves. So I think that that's something that if I could remind women of, is that you are strong and stronger
Mhm.
than you have ever known. And you are strong because you are feel your emotions, and you are strong because you embrace what's right for you. And it's beautiful. And I just hope for more women acknowledging that and doing that in the future.
I love that. That is so, so true. Lastly, Jessica, where can our listeners find you for more information and resources?
Yes. So I have my podcast, Your Next Best Decision with Jessica Frew. And then I am on Instagram. That is where I am the most active, at Hey Jessica Frew. You can find me there. And then also, I believe this is dropping right before a workshop that I have coming up. It's a free workshop. You can come to that, and we are going to really dive into trusting your gut and how that helps you in the decision-making process and how to utilize that. So you can get, that is free. You can find, I'm assuming, the link in the show notes, or you can go to Jessica Frew or yournextbestdecision.com / what is it? Workshop. That's what it is. And also I have a should score quiz at heyjessicafrew.com / should. So you, or sorry, man, I am dropping these links today,
That is okay.
/ quiz, so that you can find out how much you are shooting on yourself and where you are shooting on yourself in your life, to pull us out of that perfect partner and to pull us out of those things where we're placing judgment on ourselves.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. And yes, we will have all of the correct links with whether it's forward,
Thank
backward,
you.
slash in the show notes. So listeners, do not worry. But we've reached the end of the show today. Thank you so much, Jessica Frew, for joining us to discuss how to fix your broken decision maker, confidence in decision making. And, I really appreciate your sharing your story. That means a lot to me and our listeners. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Listen, and listeners, if you or someone you know is going through a divorce or is thinking about a divorce in the Northeast Florida area, please reach out to us at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com. You'll find the link in the episode description. And thank you for listening.